I want to welcome the board members here. If there is any staff, with the exception of Laura or anybody from the public, I would ask you to turn your cameras off so we can stay, I can stay focused on the board members. I'm working, and I apologize today, I couldn't get into the office to do this meeting, so I'm doing it from my tablet at home, so I've got a very small screen. So Sarah, I'll ask you if you see hands, or Laura, if you see hands, make sure you just shout. I think as a board, we've known each other for a long time, so I'm going to forgo introductions. I think we have everybody with the exception of Mac and Commissioner Beal. So everybody else is present. So let's go right into the agenda. Item number 1 on the agenda is the minutes. Has everybody had an opportunity to review the minutes?
Yes, I did note to Sarah that I was not recorded as present, but I was present. But I move we accept the minutes.
With the change of showing Roger present, is there any objections, or do we have a second to the motion?
I'll second it.
Judy seconded. Is there any objections to the motion? Hearing and seeing no objections, the motion passes. Move right on to both fund balances and project allocation status. Sarah.
Great. I'm going to just quickly review what's here on your screen and in your board packet. We've got made more progress spending down the 2009 bond funds. We've got just a little bit hanging out there, and that is associated with an encumbered access improvement grant contract. So once that wraps up, that number should go away. We've also made progress spending down the 2011 bond funds. We've got a balance of just over 400,000 there. And you can see down below the expenditures in the 2021 budgeted funds. Any questions?
Not seeing any. Move right along, Sarah.
All right.
Oh, you're on mute, Sarah.
Yep, sorry about that. Just to review again, our water access funds, we've got a total of $172,000 allocated remaining from the 2011 bond, and a $2 million balance from the Community Conservation Fund. That's the allocation that was made in statute. So gives you an idea, we've got a healthy balance for water access projects.
Any questions on those? Not seeing any.
Pat, before we go on, I just want to let you and the board know we've got a new person, Brianna, who's joining us, and she will be doing the meeting minutes. It's helpful if folks can either say their name for Brianna, or Pat, when you restate the motion, just say who made the motion and who made the second. That will get our minutes super clear.
Excellent. Thanks, Sarah.
The minutes are predictably very, very thorough, and I really appreciate it.
Yeah.
Thank you for that, Roger. That's helpful feedback. So, active projects. We've got 27 conservation and recreation projects that staff are working through. That's an allocation of just over $13 million. The one water access project that's still going. We've got 3 farmland projects and 5 working waterfront projects for a total of 36 projects with $15 million. We did recently close on Merry Meeting Park, and I will say just this morning I saw staff working on Camp Guston and Tondro. Those are all moving forward. East Grand Weston is expected to close in about 2 weeks' time, so we'll have more to update you on that front at our next meeting.
Great, thanks, Sarah. Any questions from the board on project allocations? not seeing any. Let's move that right. Let's move right along then to the biennial report. Sarah has reported to me that the biannual report is ready in draft form. She did share it with the commissioners as is customary to do a first review. My first review was cursory, and I didn't see any red flags. But she has been waiting on Commissioner Beal, who has been under the weather. So at this point in time, we are going to send the biennial report out to the board for review and comment, and we're going to do that by email. And so any comments that you might have, Sarah, are you going to handle that, or you have somebody on staff that'll handle any potential edits?
I think what's going to happen is I'll send the email out to the board and I'll give you instructions on who to send your feedback to.
Okay, great. Perfect. Thank you. Is the board okay with that approach with the biennial report? It's due in January. It was a little bit late, but it's they usually don't scold us too bad for being a little late. They've got enough on their plate over there right now. Okay, great. Moving on to projects to be acted on. Sarah.
Right, we're going to go right into North Deering, and this is Jason.
Okay, North Deering is the Round 10B project and is here for a final award. Again, this is 16 acres in the city of Portland as urban open space and recreation. And the 16 acres is part of a larger project the city is doing. They're also acquiring adjacent to that an 8-acre ball field, which is part of one of the parcels, and we've excluded LMF from LMF funding from that parcel in accordance with statute. The preliminary award on this was $279,000. Based on the appraised values that came in, they'll be eligible for $164,123, and that's because the appraisal on one of the parcels came in quite a bit lower than expected. So the AOC met on January 3rd and received an appraised value of $328,246 for the 2 parcels making up the project. Again, that's only for the LMF funded portion of that, excluding the ball field, and that was accepted by the AOC.
So I guess I should make a recommendation.
That's the next.
Or a motion.
That's the next slide.
Okay. There it is. I move to approve the recommendations of the LMF Appraisal Oversight Committee and accept the appraiser's value of $328,246.
This is a committee motion. It does not need a second. Is there any discussion on the motion? Barbara.
Mr. Chairman, just a question of information for Jason. There was another parcel that we didn't decide to include in this. Did you get any update on how the applicant is dealing with that other parcel? Is that going to come back to us, or are they going to deal with that separately?
My understanding is that they weren't able to work out a deal with that landowner, and therefore that will not be added to the project at this time.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Barbara. Roger.
Yes, this is just an anecdote, but I was a founding member of the Portland Land Bank in 1999. And at our first meeting of the spring after winter, we did a tour of open spaces in the city of Portland. And this was the very first property we looked at. And within a short time, we decided to enter it into the Portland Land Bank's registry. So I go back 24 years on this, and it's a great piece of property.
Great. Thank you for that, Roger. Any additional comments or questions on the motion? Oh, can you back up to that slide, please? I'll read into the record. This is a motion from the Appraisal Oversight Committee to accept the appraised value of $328,246. Is there any objections to the motion? Seeing no objections, the motion passes. Jason?
All right, public notice. Oh, that should say North Deering and not Thayer Brook. I can assure you that the actual public notice does say North Deering and not Thayer Brook. In any case, it was advertised in the Press Herald and the Kennebec Journal on January 13th. We have not received any public comments, but I did receive an inquiry from a member of the public about how to comment from a man named George Rowe, and he is here in the meeting today. So, for whatever it's worth, I'll share that information.
Yeah, the public comment period has ended. So we're going to move on. There should have been a defined time frame for public comment, Jason, in your notice.
There is, but the notice also says that public comment may be received at the meeting.
Oh, it does say that. Okay, then
It does.
Then if that is the case, if there is any public comment, you can please raise your hand.
And I see Mr. Rowe has his hand up.
Mr. Rowe, the floor is yours.
Thank you. My name is George Rowe. I live in Portland, and I wanted to ask the board to table this motion. I was trying to figure out which motion I should be raising my concerns about, but I think the appraisal is a separate issue. But I'm asking you to table this and to spend some time, hopefully with the staff or whoever you think should be involved, doing a deeper dive on this transaction. And specifically what I would ask you to do is to undertake an honest and thorough equity analysis. This project has been pitched in the materials before you, and for basically in a couple of different forums, including to the federal government for a separate funding stream, as a something to increase the ability of low-income, specifically diverse members of Portland's citizenry to have access to public recreation and open space. The reality here is that that is basically, at best, a white lie, at worst, a complete fabrication of what's going on here. This property is ringed with very, very affluent homeowners. The minimum value of virtually every house in this neighborhood immediately adjacent to this property is single family houses are probably $500,000. There are definitely on the tax rolls today some properties adjacent to this property, to this area, that are over $1 million. So that alone should tell you that equity is not actually why this transaction is before you and being driven by the stakeholders that have written all these letters of support. And furthermore, there are so many conjectures in the materials about the lack of open space in this neighborhood, which simply are not true. For example, the school, the two schools, a middle school and an elementary school, sit on a very large area of open space with playgrounds and ball fields, quite a few amenities actually that have been there since those schools were built, basically in the 50s and the 60s. And those there was a project with one of the schools that involved creating a specific path to Pine Grove Park, which is a 6.5 acre piece of park that's been a park for a long time. That's literally just involves crossing one street. And the access issues for this new North Deering Park have been completely unresolved in the materials before you. There is talk about a pedestrian access point, but there's actually no money allocated and no real plan, literally not even like a sketch of how normal, regular people on foot would be able to access this property through that pedestrian point. In fact, your appraisal specifically talked about right now being encroachments on one of the selling landowners in that area that is supposed to be the area where people would access this area on foot. Vehicular access is also extremely problematic. It involves going through the subdivision, the ball field drive subdivision that was built. And those people kind of consider this area sort of almost their private park. And it is in a way, because about 5.5 acres is considered basically set aside conservation land for mostly their benefit. And that fact has been elided, I think, in the materials, if not outright obscured. So my point is that this process should have integrity. If we are telling the public that this is being driven for equity issues, for equity concerns, and to address inequities in park access in the city of Portland, that should be a demonstrated fact that you guys have kicked the tires on. You have not done that. You've sort of looked the other way, frankly, and taken a lot of those statements at face value without really examining them deeply. And I would like you to do that so that we have assurances that this money is being allocated for the right reasons, is not just simply creating development buffers for affluent homeowners, which is unfortunately what most of Maine conservation looks like today and in the recent past, and probably for the future. So thank you for letting me speak, and I hope you do the right thing and postpone action today so that we can get a much better and clearer sense of what's going on here for everyone's benefit. Thank you.
Thank you for those comments. Do we have any other additional comments from the public? Any other hands, Laura or Sarah?
No, none.
None. Okay, thank you. Can you go back on the slide, please? Go back a slide.
Yep, sorry about that. Not intentional.
So we have we finalized the allocation motion. So in the process that we follow to ensure that we continue on with our strong fiduciary responsibility as a board, we have a draft motion up. Would anybody like to make a motion utilizing the draft motion or any additional motion? Jim. You're on mute, Jim.
Muted. I'd like to move that we confirm the allocation of $164,123 in LMF conservation and recreation funding to support the acquisition, subject to standard conditions.
Do we have a second on the motion? Roger Burley, second on the motion. Is there any questions or comments on the motion? Not seeing any questions or comments from the board on the motion. Is there any objections to the motion? Seeing all board members on my screen and seeing nobody's hands raised in objection, the motion passes. I would like to just make one comment that this board certainly has shown a strong fiduciary responsibility to the money that has been obligated to us to spend on conservation projects. And any equity issues that have been raised here certainly should be brought to the city. And the city is an applicant. We've seen no objections to this particular project. And I would also say the other issues that have been raised would be thoroughly gone through as far as the due diligence on this project. This project is a long way from being final. In due diligence will address many of the other comments. So for that, we will move on to the next project.
And this is a Laura project. So Laura
Yes.
will be presenting.
Thank you, Sarah. Yeah, these are the Keyser Corridor lands. These are the Patterson Hill lands in Oxford County. And here's a view. I believe this is from Patterson Hill up that way. The views out from that 23-acre parcel. Next slide, please. It is combined. They're two parcels. Together, they make about 352 acres, give or take. The 23-acre smaller parcel really captures the top of Patterson Hill and tremendous panoramic views. And the larger parcel, the 328-acre parcel, give or take, has these other characteristics: the frontage on both sides of Patterson Brook and on the Keezer River. And each of them, I think particularly the 23-acre, has wonderful access for recreation, snowmobile trails. It's a beloved area. Next slide, please. The Appraisal Oversight Committee met. Oh no, this was on January 3rd. Oh dear. January 3rd, man, Jason, I'm just trying to make it, you weren't all alone here. They met on January 3rd to discuss the appraisal, and they reported a combined value of $492,000. This to note that in the proposal, the allocation between the parcels was slightly different. The smaller parcel was estimated and appraised at a higher level at the proposal stage, but the larger parcel was appraised at a lower number. But these are the numbers that came back that the AOC approved. And fortunately for the applicant, this does not disturb their ask for LMF. They're still in the clear. So the total appraised value of these two parcels was $492,000. Next slide, please. So we have a draft motion. These look like old slides. So the appraiser's value was $492,000 for the two parcels. That is the correct number, $492,000. And yeah, here we go. And here we go. That is the motion number 1. So that 490 should be number 2. I'm sorry, this would probably be for you, Bob. Oh, you're muted, Bob.
Sorry. I move to approve the recommendation of the LMF Appraisal Oversight Committee and accept the appraiser's value of $490,000 for the two parcels.
And it should be 492,000. My apologies.
Yeah, well, it's a long time since November, so.
Oh, geez, thanks for rubbing it in. Next slide, please. Oh, sorry. No, I'll be quiet now.
Hold on. So we have a committee motion on the table. Does anybody have any comments or questions on the committee motion? Does not need a second. As a committee motion. This is a motion from the LMF Appraisal Oversight Committee to accept the appraised value of $492,000 for the two parcels. Is there any objections to the motion? Seeing all board members on my screen, seeing no hands raised and objections, the motion passes without objection.
Thank you. Next slide, please. Thank goodness. There was a public notice was announced and it was announced in the Kennebec Journal and the Portland Press Herald on January 13th, and there were no comments received. So we prepared a draft motion number 2. This number is correct. 245,000 is what they're seeking.
Great. Would anybody like to make this motion or any other motion regarding this project?
I move the draft motion to confirm the allocation of $245,000 in LMF conservation and recreational funding to support the acquisition subject to standard conditions. This is Barbara Traft and Brianna.
Great. Dan, do we have a second? Jim, did you second? Is that what? Yes. Is that your hand going up?
No, I'm sorry, I was muted. Roger Burley seconds it.
Oh, Roger. Okay. So we have a motion by Barbara, seconded by Roger, to confirm the allocation of $245,000 in LMF conservation and recreational funding to support the acquisition subject to standard conditions. Any comments or questions on the motion or on the project? Before we take a vote, is there any public comment on this project?
I see no hands.
Seeing no hands, is there any objections from the board on the motion on the table? Seeing all members present on the screen there and no hands being raised in objection, the motion passes. Excellent.
Thank you.
Thank you. Moving on to the Farmland Access Protection Program RFP.
Great. I think we've got Alex Redfield here from the Bureau of Agriculture who's going to present.
Alex.
Morning, everybody. Nice to see you again. Not much from me this morning, except a quick overview of how we hope the Working Farmland Access and Protection Program rolls out for 2023. So just a couple quick slides. First is the timeline that you see in front of you. This is pretty similar to the calendar that we ran with last year. You see all the steps, even those that won't make it back to the LMF board, but we do hope to have final recommendations to you in the September meeting. You'll note that we're toying with the idea of releasing a second RFP in the middle of 2023. We've talked about that on and off. That's based on applicant feedback and a desire to synchronize our funding opportunity with NRCS's agricultural easement program. We want to make sure that there's not too much time between each deadline so that folks can use both of those funding streams to match each other.
Great, thank you. Any more slides, Alex?
Yeah, just two quick ones. No changes to the workbook of substance. We did have a couple suggestions from our review panel. My kid is homesick today. She's clawing her way in, so I will just leave the words to speak for themselves for a second. Hey, Harry, can you just give me 1 second? We're going to take the feedback from the review panel and incorporate it into how we support the reviewers in going through the applications to try to clarify a few things that were murky, but we're not changing the workbook for applicants. And I have one more slide. Just a couple things are ongoing with our 2022 awards, just for update's sake. Making some changes to our easement template and drafting an OPAV policy. We've talked about OPAVs at previous meetings, the option to purchase at agricultural value on these properties. That is present in most farmland protection easements that are happening in the state and regionally right now. And so I want to update our language to make sure that we can accommodate that on potential submissions. Both of these projects are currently at the AG's office for review. Just working through that as the next step to make progress on our 2022 awards.
Barbara.
Alex, I realize that the letters of inquiry aren't due until May 19th, but do you have any sense of projects lining up here for that May 19th deadline?
Yeah, so I don't know what preliminary inquiries have started to trickle in. We have a few meetings with land trusts and potential partners, so similar level of communication at this point to where we were last year before we launched the program. But I do have a little barnstorming tour of outreach set up for the next month or two to try to expand awareness of the program and help folks think about if their project is a good fit.
Great, thank you.
Thanks.
Any other questions of Alex? Not seeing. Barbara, you didn't put your hand back up or just? Oh. Barbara's hand is down. I don't see any other hands. Alex, the last slide you have currently under legal review. So is this legal review going to further modify the RFP, or is the RFP set? And this is just policy review.
Yeah, this is policy review and will be the documents that are under review now will be used in the easement drafting process. So no changes to the RFP pending.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you for that clarification.
Sure.
So from board perspective, is the board all set with this timing as far as the RFP and getting the RFP out the door? Not seeing. I think we've got consensus. I'm not seeing any hand raised, so I think we're good to go on this one.
Thank you.
Thank you, Alex. Appreciate that. Next item on the agenda is the access improvement grants. Is that Jason?
It is. Before I dive into this, do we need a board motion to adopt the workbook and issue the call for proposals for the farm?
on the farmland.
Yep.
I think we've got consensus. Trying to remember, I think we've done it frankly both ways. If there is desire from the board to have a formal motion, that's fine. But I think we've got consensus to adopt the workbook and move the RFP out the door. Seeing thumbs up and head shaking. Yes, we're good, Jason.
All right, thank you. All right, so as we do every year, we are awarding access improvement grants to projects that closed last year. The process for this is that after this meeting, I will send letters out to all of the eligible applicants. They will have the month of February to send me their proposal for how they would like to spend that money, and the board will vote on final awards in March. However, this is our first go round doing these awards for round 10 projects. So the board does need to decide on the amount of funding that they'll be eligible for access improvements. So I've laid out 3 options. There are certainly other permutations of this, but in round 9, what we did, 2% of the LMF award was base eligibility, or if it was an adaptive access, a universally accessible project, then they would be eligible for up to 4% of the LMF award. When you made the preliminary allocations for round 10 projects, you used 5% of the LMF award as a set aside for all projects. So that would be another option. That set aside was not, I think, intended at that point as a determination of this is what people would be eligible for. It was just a bookkeeping number at that point. So there's, this, I guess the point is that's not, the question has not been answered. That's just one of the options. The third option is using the same calculation that we've talked about for stewardship awards, where it would be 5% of the appraised value for the first $200,000 and then 2% up to a maximum of $25,000 award. And the reason that we talked about doing that for the stewardship awards was because the small awards were not tremendously helpful. There was a desire to get small projects, a meaningful amount without tying up too much money in it. That's why there's the cap. And I think those considerations could apply to access improvement as well. So those are the 3 options. On the next slide, there's a table that shows how that would break down for the round 10 projects that we're looking at this time. You can see there the round 9 projects just with the established round 9 eligibility amounts, and then the round 10 projects with the different options laid out. So that is what I have to say. I'll turn it over to you guys for a discussion and or a motion.
Great, thanks, Jason. Let's leave this slide up just for a minute, just so the board members can see the difference, especially on the 5% and the scaled. Certainly is a larger number. While board members are looking at this, is there any comments from members of the board on the approach? Barbara.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think that the scaled version does what we had discussed earlier, which is make it possible for a smaller project such as Plaisted Preserve, which only had an award of $64,500, to actually have enough money to make an improvement to its property to increase access. And I like it that the scaled is capped. The 5% with no cap would be, only favor very large projects. So I think the scaled version based on the appraised value is a nice option and kind of brings us up to speed with what the reality of things cost if you're improving access, improving parking, putting up a kiosk, whatever other improvements. So I think scaled would be the way to go, and would be glad to make a motion at the appropriate time.
Great, thank you, Barbara. Commissioner Camuso.
Thanks, Commissioner. I would just say I agree with Barbara and I would support the scaled version for all the reasons she just nicely outlined.
Great. Why don't we go back a slide so we can see what the motions look like? Is there any other thoughts regarding the other motions, or is everybody leaning towards scaled? That seems to be in keeping with some of the past conversations we've had with the board. I think Barbara highlighted the fact that it's certainly the other approaches certainly favor the larger projects. So, Barbara,
Yeah, the only thing I will add is that because the board set aside 5% of available funds, this approach will have an effect. It will differ from your initial set aside, and we will update you on the impact that has on available funds moving forward for the next call for proposals.
And that's something you can have for the next board meeting.
Yes,
Sarah.
exactly. Yep.
Great. Jim Norris.
Yes, Sarah, do you have a hunch as to whether it's more or less?
It will be more, because what you're talking about is 5% of the appraised value versus 5% of the award.
Yeah, I mean, if you have,
Yeah.
actually, can you move this to the next slide? You can see, Jim, just a snapshot of that cost. I mean, in some cases, it's not doubled, but it's significantly more. So we will see an impact to the overall funds available. However, it certainly is going to benefit these projects as far as access is concerned.
Thank you.
All right, let's back up. Barbara, would you like to make a motion?
Yes, I'm not seeing the motion on my screen yet.
I can see
Oh, here
Sarah
we-
feverishly trying to back the slide up. There you go.
So I guess there's no formal motion here, so I would say I would move that access improvement grants for round 10 projects will be eligible for option 3, which is scaled eligibility of 5% of the first 200,000 of appraised value, and then 2% of the appraised value over 200,000 to a maximum award of 25,000.
I will second if necessary.
We have a motion by Robert Trafton, seconded by Roger Burley. Is there any questions or comments on the motion? Not seeing any. I will attempt to read into the record the motion, which is the board is to selects option 3, the scaled eligibility of 5% of the first 200,000 of appraised value, and then 2% of the appraised value over 200,000 to a maximum award of $25,000 for access improvement grants. And this is the amount proposed for the stewardship. This would be the amount proposed for the stewardship award.
Not the stewardship, but the access
Access
improvement.
improvement grants.
And Mr. Chair, could I suggest you also add for round 10 projects in there?
We'll accept that as a friendly amendment. How's that for round 10 project?
Sounds good. Still with it.
Perfect. All the board members on the screen, is there any additional questions or comments? Is there any objections to the motion? Seeing all members on my screen and seeing no. Everybody can mute their phone.
I'm sorry.
There we go. Seeing all members on my screen and not seeing any hands raised in objection, the motion passes without objection. Excellent. Let's move on to the next agenda item, which is we've got several items under board policy topics, and I'll turn this over to Sarah.
All right. Oops, it sounds like we might need somebody to mute. We don't have to hear all the feedback. All right, so over the last several years, we've spent a considerable amount of time looking at and discussing policy issues that were identified through our work group that met in 2020 and 2021. And we've made some great progress on that. And I think that progress was identified in your board packet of those topics that we've been able to reach consensus on and those where we have some additional work. In thinking about our 2023 calendar, staff and I, together with our contract attorneys, came up with some ideas of things that have cropped up in the last year that we feel deserve some board attention. And we'd like to propose reviewing these topics in 2023. The first would be to finalize our stewardship policy and guidelines. I think we're pretty close to getting there and could probably wrap that up in March. The second topic is a review of pre-acquisition policy and observations from LMF staff and legal. We've been working on quite a few pre-acquisitions and a couple of consistent issues have come up along the way, and we have some solutions for how to make those projects go more smoothly. Number 3 is a review of our conservation accomplishments and to assess land acquisition needs and priorities. This is building on the review of the LAPAC committee priorities, progress that we've made, and continuing to think about our conservation priorities moving forward. This is an attempt, again, to be responsive to one of your statutory responsibilities of assessing land acquisition needs and priorities and sort of setting our workbook to match those. And then the last topic, which has a number of different areas that need to be reviewed and vetted and updated, has to do with our project agreements. And some of these topics are identified by the work group. Some of them are those identified by staff and our attorneys. Some of them are things identified by our DSAs. So there's a number of sort of subcategories under project agreements. The intention today was really not to go into any depth on discussing these issues, but just to get consensus feedback from you all on whether these priorities are the right ones for 2023 or if we should be looking at others.
Thanks, Sarah. These conversations are always tough when we're doing remote meetings, but does any member of the board wish to delve into any of these topics? I did talk to Sarah this morning. There is nothing that is on this list that needs to be resolved today. We can table this for the next board meeting and when we're in person and kind of dig a little bit deeper into these topics, or we can start some of the conversations now if we can check any of them off and reach consensus. Any thoughts from members of the board? Barbara, see you. I saw your mute button go off and before your hand.
You're on top of things, Mr. Chair. I wonder about number 1, the stewardship policy and guidelines. And I thought that we had arrived at consensus on this. And the reason I raise it is this, I thought we wanted to have available for round 10.
Barbara, my recollection is that there was general consensus on the concept, but there was some additional work we needed to do in sort of understanding options available to state agencies and some discussions with the AG's office that needed to be resolved before we finalized it.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the wrap up part of just getting back to you all and what we've gotten back from the AG's office.
So Sarah, would this, and I remember that we were going to try to have a separate track for state agencies and how to handle stewardship funds with them. I guess I'm I'm just wondering, does this mean that we wouldn't be awarding stewardship funds for round 10?
No, that does not mean that. The intention is and has been to award stewardship funds.
Okay, so that's already a part of what's gone out to people who've made inquiry as of January 13th. Is that correct?
That's correct. They understand that stewardship funds are eligible costs for their project.
Okay, well, as long as that doesn't hold us up, if we don't approve that today, then you feel comfortable with the timeline that at our next board meeting, you'd have some additional information for us and we could make some final decisions?
That is the plan. Yep.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Thank you, Barbara. Anybody else want to raise any issues associated with the topics on your on the board? Not seeing any. So why don't we table these items until the next board meeting when we're hopefully we'll be face to face and we can set some time aside to kind of dig deeper into them. Great.
So moved.
Perfect. We've got consensus on that. Let's move on to the next agenda item, which are the staff updates.
Yeah, so just a quick update to let folks know, we received 26 inquiries for our round 11 RFP. This is both projects of statewide significance and community conservation projects. Those 26 inquiry forms, you can see the map to your right, what the geographic distribution is. They encompass 8,300 acres with a request of just under $10.5 million, which is anticipated to leverage over $12 million. These proposals are due later in March. We'll be able to give you an update at the March board meeting on just exactly how many of these inquiries made it through to full proposals.
Great. I'm not seeing any hands, Sarah, so why don't we just continue on?
Great. I'm going to let Laura give you a quick update on Wise Hive.
Very quick. Thank you, Sarah. Staff is continuing to work through some of the refinements of our Wise Hive process. We expect to have one more staff meeting to really solidify our thinking on this, hand it back to Wise Hive, and then we should hopefully have something for you all maybe to help us be beta testers and what have you, so you can finally get into the system and see what you think. Do you want me to say anything more, Sarah? Does that cover it?
No, that covers it. And I just would, if there are any questions from the board, I'd love to hear them.
They're afraid I'm going to send them another document. I know it. They're afraid I'm going to send them another diagram. So I don't blame you.
Yeah, no more diagrams. Unless it's on how to get to the owner.
It's just a deal.
Okay. All right, next item.
Yeah, so just the last item, I wanted to introduce everyone to our new intern, AJ. AJ, if you want to turn your screen on, I can't see everyone, so maybe you already have your camera on. I'm not sure.
Can you
but
see me?
AJ is going to be joining us for this spring semester. She's a graduate student finishing up her graduate degree at USM's Muskie School of Public Service. And AJ will be helping us with looking at conservation priorities moving forward. AJ, I don't know if you're in a place where you can introduce yourself. AJ is like going above and beyond on her first day here as an intern. She has no power at home and no Wi-Fi and is doing her best to be with us.
Yeah, thank you, Sarah. Yeah, I'm in a coffee shop, so I can't say a whole lot, but it's very nice to meet you all. And I look forward to meeting you in person at some point at a future board meeting.
Great. Well, welcome aboard, AJ. Great. We're glad to have you. Excellent. Sarah, anything else? Just okay. Keep going. You got more.
This is where we're at. We've got a couple of AOC meetings coming up, and our next board meeting will be March 21st. So until then, we'll be in touch with the biennial report. And that's where we're at.
Excellent. Barbara's hand is up.
Mr. Chair, if I could just go back to an earlier comment by Mr. Rowe. I don't know if someone from the city of Portland is online. My concern is good communications, and if it would be advisable to at least share those comments with the applicant and ask for any response if they would like to make one to the staff or the board.
Yeah, thank you, Barbara. Certainly the comments by Mr. Rowe are part of the public record, and the applicant, being the city of Portland, will have an opportunity through due diligence to make comments to bolster the record in that regard to the comments. So I think we'll be covered as long as nobody else wants to put anything else on the record today.
Thank you.
Thank you, Barbara. Any other items to come before the board today? Seeing none. Barbara, since your hand's up, how about a motion to adjourn?
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
Second.
We have a motion by Barbara, seconded by Roger Burley to adjourn. Seeing no objections, thank you very much for a very efficient meeting today, folks. We appreciate it, and we will see you all in March. Have a great day. Hopefully you can get dug out of the snowstorm and the next one coming. Have a good day.
Great to see you all.